Hello everybody, my name is Karryshh and welcome back to another recap video. This time it's a latest Korean horror movie inspired by a real story, Spring Garden. It's a story about a haunted house where misfortune unleashed itself on a family. And to be honest, it's a really good movie. If you like Korean horror, you should definitely give it a try. On top of that, if you're new to my channel, then make sure to subscribe and like this video because this is free for you and it's basically the only thing that helps me out on this platform. With that said, sit back and relax as I recap Spring Garden. So the story kicks off with 4 teenagers arriving at this beautiful house near a forest. Their names are Mei-jin, Yora, Jin-rai, and Hyun-suk. And they're all part of some gang. From the way Jin-rai talks, it seems like they've come specifically to check this place out. They all head inside, but Hyun-suk stays outside as a lookout, making sure that no one escapes from the inside. Inside the house there was no electricity and things were broken or out of place, which confuses everyone. Meanwhile, outside, Hyun-suk decides to snap a selfie, but in his photo, he spots a girl who wasn't actually there. And in the next moment, she vanishes from the photo as well. Back inside, Jin-rai finds a room full of erotic photos, and meanwhile, Mei-jin stumbles upon a children's room. Suddenly, a noise comes from the closet, and of course, Mei-jin checks it out, but no one was there. A moment later, as she was looking out the window at Hyun-suk, she catches a glimpse of a dark figure in the bushes. Then an invisible force plays with her hair, making Mei-jin's spine shiver, and just then, Yora enters the room and scares her. Now we find out that these teenagers had come to the house looking for a girl named Hyun-jo, but they don't find her here. With all these creepy paranormal things happening, they start to suspect that Hyun-jo might be trying to scare them. Then in the dark, Jin-rai spots a mysterious figure that doesn't respond when he calls out, and suddenly, it terrifies everyone, sending them running out of the house. The scene cuts to a pregnant woman named So-hui. When she wakes up the next morning, she's horrified to find that her husband Shang-soo has committed unalivement right above where she was sleeping. The scene shifts to Shang-soo's funeral, where So-hui is deeply shaken. Here we meet Detective Nam, who's been trying to catch the gang we just saw at the house. Later, Nam visits So-hui, explaining that her husband did indeed die by unalivement and it wasn't a murder, something that So-hui was initially believing. And this revelation completely breaks her down. Then right at the funeral, a fight breaks out. Shang-soo's sister is yelling at So-hui's sister Hai-ran, demanding to know what her sister did to push Shang-soo to unalivement. Shang-soo's mother joins in and insults So-hui and Hai-ran, which enrages Hai-ran so much that she ends up attacking Shang-soo's sister. In the middle of the chaos, So-hui gets caught in the struggle and ends up getting hit in the stomach, and tragically, she suffers a miscarriage. So-hui faints and Hai-ran rushes her to the hospital. Poor So-hui has now lost everything, and then that night, she falls asleep, clutching to her ultrasound photo. But in the middle of the night, strange noises started coming from her bedroom. So-hui gets up to check the room, but before she could open the door, she gets a call from a lawyer. The next morning, So-hui and Hai-ran meet this lawyer who revealed that Shang-soo left So-hui a substantial amount of money and a house he had been secretly building for her. And it turns out that this was the same house we saw earlier, the one haunted by a demonic spirit. The lawyer advises So-hui to sell this house. Then he shows her a recent photo of the house front door, where one can clearly see the eerie image of the demonic girl in the background. The photo was taken just 2 days ago, and now the scene shifts to a man named Jung, who's at the same haunted house examining it. He even starts whistling, and as he does, the wind around him picks up, and it was clear that Jung might know something about the house's dark energy. On his way back, Jung spots So-hui and Hairan who were heading towards the house. The sisters soon arrive there, and as So-hui takes a look around, she was overwhelmed with emotion. The house was everything she dreamed of: a porch swing, a garden named Spring Garden, and every little detail she could have wanted. It was clear that Shang-Su designed this house specifically with his wife in mind. Inside the house, the two sisters notice a broken vase and assume that maybe some girl must have snuck in and caused the mess. They dismiss the idea of ghosts, thinking it might be fake theories since the house is brand new. As they explore, So-hui briefly glimpses a dark figure but chooses to ignore it. Then she walks into the nursery room where her baby would live, but she wouldn't see. But we see that there was blood slowly dripping from under the crib. After looking around the house, the sisters start to leave, but just then, So-hui spots the same girl in a window. She rushes back into the house, but instead of finding this girl, she sees a man standing there. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hits her and So-hui unexpectedly faints. Following this incident, So-hui has to see a psychiatrist because the doctors were thinking that she's having hallucinations, but So-hui knew it wasn't in her head. She suspects that something about Jiangsu's death is tied to the house, and determined, she decides to move in permanently to uncover the truth. At the same time, we get a glimpse of a young girl locked in a room in a terrible condition. Now, who is this girl will be revealed later. And now the next day, So-hui officially moves into her dream home and invites her sister's family over. That first night, as So-hui is preparing dinner, she cracks open an egg and out falls a tiny dead chick, making her gag with horror. Later, Hairan, her husband, and their two kids, Kim and Song, arrive at the house to spend time with her. The family enjoys dinner together, and afterward, Kim and Song head outside to play on the swing. But soon enough, Song starts hearing strange noises coming from the bushes. Song decides to check the sound and she spots an invisible figure breathing right in front of her. She reaches out her hand to catch the figure, but suddenly her scream fills the air and everyone rushes outside and they find Song in tears, sitting in the garden. Hairan comforts her daughter and Song tells her that someone had grabbed her hand tightly. Obviously scared, Hairan decides to go home with her family, but on the way, she notices marks on Song's hand, finger imprints, and she grows even more worried about her sister. Now later that night, while brushing her teeth, So-hui notices similar handprints on her own arm, and she couldn't figure out how they got there. The next day, Song's mark mysteriously disappears, but Hairan's concern keeps growing. That same day, as So-hui is working on her book, her laptop glitches and a video of a fetus suddenly starts playing. Out of nowhere, the fetus looks directly at her and blood splatters from inside the screen onto her face and she jolts awake, realizing it was just a nightmare. However, when she wakes up, she notices a blood stain on her ceiling. She immediately heads up to the nursery to investigate, but when she looks under the crib, nothing was there. And then she hears footsteps running down the hallway and she follows the sound into a room where she sees her husband ghost sitting on a sofa. So he was already desperate to find out answer, so she tried to speak to her husband's spirit, but suddenly a single ant crawls into her eye. She feels her face contorting painfully as Jiangsu bends his finger, and in sync, her own finger starts to snap. Then So-hui's entire body twists unnaturally and she feels ants crawling all over her skin. And just then, she wakes up, realizing it was just another nightmare. Now, as soon as she wakes up, So-hui hears noises coming from the nursery upstairs and she again rushes back to check, but no one was there. However, this time she looks around and she finds a pregnancy test under a table which was positive. She decides to search the basement of her old things and finds another pregnancy tests among them. Now, one of these tests was hers from the time when she got pregnant, but the other one was someone else's, and she couldn't figure out who was the person who did this other pregnancy test. Now, when So-hui was confused, suddenly a picture of her shatters by itself. When she picks up the photo, a small image of a teenage girl falls out. So-hui then soon realizes that this girl might be connected to the house. Now, So-hui takes the photo to a nearby school where students wear uniforms similar to the one in the picture. However, the teacher refuses to tell her anything about the girl. However, So-hui refuses to give up, and she started asking other students about this girl in the photo, but none of them were willing to help. Meanwhile, we see Jung returning to the haunted house. He was ringing a bell, creating an eerie atmosphere, and then he digs a small hole, placing a bundle wrapped in white cloth into the ground. It was then that Hairan, who had come to visit So-hui, sees Jung doing this, and she immediately told him to stop and leave the premises of the house, but instead, he gives her his business card and warns her to leave this house immediately before the demonic entity possesses her. And meanwhile, So-hui meets with Detective Nam and shows him the photo. Now, from Detective Nam, So-hui discovers that the girl in the photo is named Hyun-jo, who has actually been missing for months, and Detective Nam has been searching for her too. So-hui begins to wonder if Hyun-jo's disappearance might be somehow linked to her husband's death. While Detective Nam steps out to take a phone call, So-hui suddenly spots his notebook and notices a photo of the same gang we saw at the beginning of the movie, with Hyun-jo among them. The notebook has details about each person in the gang, so So-hui quickly snaps a photo of their names and addresses. Now, after this, her first stop is the location from the photo, and surprisingly, she runs into two of the gang members, Yora and Hyun-suk. She asks Yora about Hyun-jo, but Yora says nothing, and when So-hui tries to talk to Hyun-suk, Yora grabs him and the two starts to walk away. It was clear that both of them are terrified of So-hui. Possibly, they have mistaken her for a detective. The two hop on a bike, speeding away, convinced that So-hui is after them. Now, as Yora and Hyun-suk were trying to run away, they get into a terrible accident, and both of them died on the spot. Now, at this very moment, Jung, the shaman, starts bleeding from his nose, and he just knew that there was an accident, and he also knew who was killed, showing how powerful he really is. Now, after this, we see So-hui tracking down Jin-rai to talk to him, but by now, he's received a warning from the group, and he was already suspicious that So-hui might be a detective. Now, when Jin-rai sees So-hui, he takes off running. So-hui chases after him, and luckily, Jin-rai ended up on a dead end, where So-hui cornered him. So-hui first reassures him that she's not a detective, she just wants to talk. And after that, So-hui asks him if he knew her husband Jang-soo, but Jin-rai has never heard of him. And after revealing this, he walks off, but So-hui gave him her umbrella cause it was raining outside. On his way home, Jin-rai stops to light a cigarette, but suddenly feels someone's presence behind him. Terrified, he throws So-hui's umbrella aside and rushes home, all the while sensing that someone or something is following him. When he gets to his house, he's horrified to see the umbrella lying right by his gate. Panicking, he fumbles with his keys, trying to unlock the door, but just then, a demonic spirit appears in front of him. Overcome with fear, Jin-rai ran for his life down the stairs, only to find the spirit waiting for him on the steps. Desperate to run away, he jumps from the second floor and lands with a thud. Now, as he stands up, he looks upwards, but suddenly, So-hui's umbrella falls from above and impaled through his face. And moments later, Jin-rai dies in agony. Meanwhile, So-hui arrives home, where Hairan told her everything that happened. Now together, they dig in the garden and pull up that small white bundle buried by Jung. Inside, they find a rotten object along with a lock of hair wrapped in a piece of paper covered in incantations, which leaves both sisters horrified. Furious, So-hui calls Jung on the number he gave her, yelling at him for involving them in something so sinister. Jung, on the other hand, simply tells her to leave the house immediately, but So-hui keeps cursing at him, and around the same time, Detective Nam finds Jinrai's body. Back at So-hui's house, we catch a glimpse of the spirit that's been haunting the place, and now the things were quickly spiraling out of the control. The next day, Detective Nam decides to keep a close watch on So-hui, cause ever since she got involved in this case, 3 people have died, and Nam was determined to figure out what's going on. He follows her all day long, and today So-hui goes to meet the last surviving gang member, Mei Jin. Arriving at Mei Jin's house, So-hui finds the door already open, and inside, the entire place was covered in incantations, and it means that Mei Jin is the same girl we saw earlier, locked in a room. So-hui speaks to Mei Jin from outside the room, but the moment she mentions Hyunjo's name, Mei Jin's voice freezes in fear, and she starts rambling about that how it wasn't her fault. Mei Jin then begins to tell a story, and from here we go back in the past. Now we learn that Hyunjo initially met Mei Jin online, unaware that Mei Jin was part of a gang. Mei Jin eventually pulled Hyunjo into the gang, but Hyunjo, being a kind-hearted girl, never truly fit in with them. The gang members noticed this, and one night they decided to take advantage of her. They got her extremely drunk and took her to an apartment where she passed out. From that point on, they held her captive, and whenever she tried to escape, they beat her. But then, the gang took things to an even darker place. They started drugging Hyunjo unconscious, and they accepted money from strangers, allowing these strangers to be intimate with her while she was helpless. Hearing this, So-hui is horrified to her core, but Mei Jin coldly tried to justify it, saying that they only wanted to make her like them. So-hui was furious, but then she further learns by Mei Jin that Hyunjo managed to escape the gang's clutch, and she went and hid inside a house, and Hyunjo is still in that house, which shivers So-hui's soul. Now So-hui removes the incantation blocking the room and steps inside only to find Mei Jin in a terrible condition. Mei Jin was actually chained up in the room by someone, and So-hui spots a photo that reveals Mei Jin is actually Jung's daughter. This means Jung kept her locked up to protect her from the demonic spirit, preventing it from killing her too. But suddenly, So-hui loses control of herself and picks up a glass bottle and smashes it over Mei Jin's head. Meanwhile, Detective Nam gets a call with a disturbing news. Actually, Jinrai's death was caused by So-hui's umbrella, and that was why So-hui became a prime suspect, and he rushes off to arrest So-hui. Back at Mei Jin's place, So-hui was now completely possessed by the demonic spirit, and she raises a shard of glass to kill Mei Jin. But just in time, Detective Nam arrives and manages to stop her. The scene shifts to the haunted house where Hairan is staying with her daughter, Song. Song suddenly sees the spirit, which lures her down into the basement. At the same time, Detective Nam arrests So-hui. As Detective Nam is taking So-hui away, she tells him that she didn't try to kill Mei Jin because something grabbed her hand and she was not in control. But of course, Nam doesn't believe her. So-hui soon learns that 3 members of the gang were dead, and all the suspicions were falling on her. After seeing their photos, So-hui starts having visions, and she realizes that the demonic spirits actually belongs to Hyunjo. It was actually Hyunjo's spirit that took revenge on the gang members, and for some reason her spirit is now stuck at So-hui's house. This means that her home is not safe for anyone, and just then, So-hui gets a call from Hairan, who tells her that Song has suddenly disappeared. So-hui panics, but before she can react, the call hangs up. Now Detective Nam doesn't let her go home, so in desperation, So-hui deliberately crashes the car and escapes. Meanwhile in the basement, Hairan finds Song and asks her why she's down there. They sit in the basement for a while and start talking about the day when Song's hand was grabbed by the invisible force. But slowly, Hairan's words start to turn darker and more demonic, and then suddenly, Hyran screams at her daughter, revealing that it was not actually Hyran. It was actually Hyunjo who has taken Hyran's apparition, and the real Hyran was actually upstairs searching for her child. Hyran reaches the children's room where blood starts pouring out of the crib, causing Hyran to panic. Hyran then hears screams coming from the basement and she rushes downstairs to try and save her daughter. At the same time, Sohui reaches her house and now everything inside is turning demonic. She quickly teams up with her sister and tries to open the basement door, but then the whole house starts to lift off the ground, with glass and debris flying toward them. A window shatters and glasses flies across the room, and one of them hits Hyran in the head, knocking her unconscious. Sohui tries to wake her sister, but just then, the lights in the house go out and the basement door slams open. Terrified, Sohui heads downstairs and finds Song sitting on the floor in a creepy manner. The ceiling of the basement was covered in large blood stains as well, and as Sohui approaches her, Song suddenly stands up and begins to watch her with a chilling gaze. Sohui now tries to run towards Song to get her, but an invisible force grabs her and throws her across the basement. That's when Sohui realizes that Song is possessed by the spirit. Sohui now muster up all her courage and she asks the spirit of Hyunjo what she was doing in her house and if she was the one who killed Shang-Su. But just then, the evil force seizes her and Sohui floated in the air, her head twisted unnaturally, and just then, a drop of blood falls into her eye and suddenly, everything became clear to her. Now actually you see, after Hyunjo escaped from the gang, she had tried to commit unalivement near this very house, but fortunately, Chang-soo saved her shortly afterward. At that time, Chang-soo was building this house for his wife and he allowed Hyunjo to stay there. After Hyunjo regained consciousness, she told Chang-soo her whole story. Chang-soo felt bad for her and they became friends, but soon they both fell in love. Now Hyunjo knew Chang-soo was married and out of jealousy, she hid a photo of herself behind Sohui's photo. But even after that, her jealousy only grew day by day, and one day, Chang-soo caught Hyunjo staring at a photo of Sohui's face and also cutting it with a pair of scissors. Afterwards, Chang-soo kicked Hyunjo out of the house, but she managed to sneak back in with some shocking news. Actually, Hyunjo was pregnant, but Chang-soo did not accept that. He threw away her pregnancy test, which Sohui later found, and we've seen that in this movie. Now, seeing Chang-soo's cold behavior, Hyunjo snapped. And for Hyunjo, Chang-soo was everything, and when he rejected her, she grabbed a knife and started stabbing her own belly, trying to end the pregnancy. Chang-soo tried to stop her, but in the struggle, Hyunjo fell from the first floor and the knife drove deep into her stomach. Chang-soo then immediately ran to call an ambulance, but by the time he returned, Hyunjo, who was deeply injured, had left the house. She was disoriented. In the end, she found herself standing in front of the spring garden that was under construction. And then she slowly walks towards it. Now Chang-soo kept calling her, but she didn't answer. Hyunjo actually had buried herself beneath the earth, and when the workers filled the pits of the garden, they didn't realize that they were unknowingly burying her alive. Hyunjo died there, and the truth about what happened is finally revealed in the eyes of Sohui. The scene shifts to Jung, who arrives outside the haunted house and starts spreading some strange liquid around the spring garden. He then stabs a pole into the ground, and with that, Hyunjo's evil spirit leaves Song's body. At the same time, Sohui regains consciousness and she rushes to check on Song, just as Jung enters the basement. Now we witness Hyunjo's spirit in the form of a whirlwind that was growing inside the basement, and the spirit was screaming in agony. Jung pulls out a knife and begins a ritual to try and stab the spirit, but Hyunjo was too powerful, and in the end, she flung him across the room. Jung tries to recover, but Hyunjo's spirit uses her power to snap his neck, in a brutal manner, eventually killing him. Now watching Jung die, So Hui was horrified, and in a panic, she grabbed Song and escaped the basement to save their lives. So Hui then tried to bring her sister back to consciousness, but as soon as Hai Ran wakes up, she says in a creepy tone, "Give me back my daughter." And hearing that, So Hui realizes that Hai Ran is now possessed by Hyunjo. At that moment, Hairan picks up a knife and So Hui runs again, but Hairan began following her in a really disturbing manner. Now while running, So Hui makes it to the spring garden and she escapes the garden to the other side with Song, but just then, evil Hairan attacks him. Now something strange happens here. As soon as Hairan steps outside the spring garden, a holy power casts her away. This happens twice, and soon the spirit realizes that she was trapped in the house because Jung had spread the holy liquid in the spring garden. The spirit now understands that she can't kill So Hui and Song, so now she starts telling So Hui another story. We learn that Shang-Su had promised Hyunjo that he would make her a part of his family, and that was why, in the past, Hyunjo had stabbed herself in the belly. Now So Hui witnesses this scene with her own eyes, and in real life, the spirit begins stabbing Hai Ran's belly with the knife. Obviously, So Hui tries desperately to save her sister, and she tried to make the spirit understand the fact that whatever happened to her was wrong. So Hui says to Hyunjo that if no one can accept her as a part of their family, then So Hui will become her family. At the same time in the vision, So Hui embraces Hai Ran and promises never to leave her. And with that promise, Hai Ran falls unconscious. Just then Detective Nam arrives with his team at So Hui's house, and as soon as they step inside, a strong wind picks up and the spirit inside Hai Ran finally came out in peace. Now the scene shifts ahead in time, where So Hui is now living alone in the house. Mysteriously, she was pregnant. One day we see Mei Jin, who had survived, and she visits Spring Garden. And actually, So Hui was calling out to Mei Jin to come inside the house, and here we realize that So Hui is now possessed by Hyunjo. It seems like So Hui is now planning to kill Mei Jin and complete Hyunjo's revenge, and she was calling out to her because the spirit can no longer leave the spring garden. And perhaps it's my theory, the child growing inside So Hui is the new incarnation of Hyunjo, because if the baby is a human, then the spirit can finally leave spring garden, and the movie ends here. Now after this, we'll learn the true story behind the Spring Garden. The real name of that place is Newelbaum Garden, and originally it was a house where a couple lived. The husband committed unalivement by hanging himself, and the reason for his unalivement was the tragic death of their daughter in an accident right in front of their house. Shortly after that, the wife mysteriously died as well, and later, the house was turned into a restaurant. But even then, strange hauntings occurred every day, and eventually, the restaurant had to be shut down. So this was the recap video on the movie Spring Garden, and I hope you have liked this video. If you have, then please subscribe to the channel and like this video. I really need your support to grow further. If you want to watch this movie, there is a link to my Telegram channel in the description box. If that link does not work, just go to Telegram and put my channel's name in the search bar. You can find this movie on my Telegram after my next upload for 7 days only. So if you're watching this video after 7 days, you may have missed this one. If you don't want to miss more, make sure to subscribe and like this video. And I'm mostly active on Insta, so you can follow me there as well. All the links are in the description box. For now, I'll see you all in the next one. Till then, stay awake, because they always see you.